On the evening of October 12, 2018, Asheville, North Carolina, was buzzing with its characteristic charm. Tourists meandered along the brick-lined streets of downtown, filling the cafes and breweries that had become synonymous with the city's identity. Street performers positioned themselves along Pack Square Park, playing bluegrass tunes under the warm, amber glow of vintage lampposts. For most, it was just another Friday night. But for Emily Harper, it marked her last known night of freedom. Emily, a 23-year-old graduate student at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, had recently settled into a small apartment near the Montfort neighborhood. Friends characterized her as responsible yet adventurous, the kind of person who effortlessly balanced her environmental science coursework with spontaneous weekend hikes along the scenic Blue Ridge Parkway. That particular Friday, Emily had dinner with two of her closest friends at a trendy downtown eatery called the Golden Finch. According to the wait staff, she seemed relaxed, laughing frequently and savoring a glass of red wine long after the meal had concluded. Later, security footage from the restaurant corroborated her presence. There she was, a tall, young woman with auburn hair styled in a loose braid, wearing a denim jacket over a floral dress. She departed at 9:17 p.m., walking out with her friends before they went their separate ways on the sidewalk. From that point onward, Emily's trail grew increasingly unclear. Her phone data, which was later subpoenaed by investigators, revealed that she texted her roommate around 9:30 p.m., indicating she would probably just head home and go to bed early. The apartment was conveniently located less than a 10-minute drive from downtown. However, Emily's car, a silver 2010 Honda Accord, remained unmoved in its parking spot outside the restaurant. Witnesses would later inform police that she mentioned opting for a ride share instead of driving, a decision that proved to be a crucial turning point in the investigation. At 10:05 p.m., Emily's phone connected to a cell tower near the River Arts District, a neighborhood filled with warehouses along the French Broad River. Locals described the area as vibrant but also somewhat unpredictable, a blend of trendy galleries and dimly lit streets. That was the final signal before her phone went silent. When Emily failed to return home that night, her roommate initially assumed that she had stayed over at a friend's place. However, by the following morning, when Emily didn't show up for her Saturday study group at the university library, alarm bells began to sound. She was known for being meticulous about her commitments, and her friends immediately began calling and texting her. By noon, her phone was still switched off, and her social media accounts, typically active with photos of mountain trails or coffee shop visits, remained silent. By Saturday evening, October 13th, Emily's parents, David and Linda Harper, had driven in from their hometown of Charlotte after receiving frantic calls from her friends. They promptly filed a missing person report with the Asheville Police Department. Detective Mark Delaney, a seasoned investigator recognized for his methodical approach, was assigned to the case. Initially, the police treated the report with careful attention. Adults, especially young ones, often disappeared off the grid for short periods. But as Delaney reviewed the preliminary facts, concern began to creep in. Emily had no history of sudden disappearances, no known mental health issues, and no indications of wanting to sever ties with her life. Her bank accounts remained untouched after Friday evening. Her last known text message suggested she intended to go straight home. And then there was the puzzling gap between her leaving the restaurant and her phone signal pinging a mile away. The search commenced with a sense of urgency. Officers canvassed the River Arts District, showing Emily's photo to bar owners, street vendors, and late-night regulars. One bartender recalled seeing someone resembling Emily enter a nearby brewery around 10:20 p.m. Although security footage was inconclusive due to poorly positioned cameras capturing only silhouettes. Another tip emerged from a local artist. He claimed to have seen a young woman talking to a man beside a dark sedan on a side street around 10:30 p.m. The details were vague, but investigators meticulously noted them. By Sunday, Emily's case dominated local news headlines. Flyers featuring her smiling face taken from her university ID card appeared throughout the city. Missing. Emily Harper, 23, last seen October 12 in downtown Asheville. Volunteers organized searches along the French Broad River, fearing that she might have fallen in or been dragged into the water. Cadaver dogs were brought in, but no scent trail was detected. Detective Delaney and his team intensified their efforts. They traced rideshare logs but found no completed trips under Emily's account. A chilling possibility began to take shape. Had she entered a car, mistakenly believing it was her ride, only to encounter someone with nefarious intentions? The Harper family established a makeshift camp in Asheville, refusing to depart without answers. They held a press conference outside the police station, their voices breaking as they pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. Emily's father clutched a printed flyer, his hand visibly shaking as he said, "Our daughter is out there somewhere. Somebody saw something. Please, if you know anything, help us bring Emily home." That same night, Detective Delaney received a call from an officer who had been reviewing traffic camera footage along Riverside Drive. At 10:41 p.m., a silver sedan was captured turning off a side street, its headlights briefly illuminating the frame. In the passenger seat, just barely visible in the grainy footage, was a figure with long auburn hair. It was the first substantial lead, and it would alter the course of the investigation dramatically. The grainy traffic footage became the vital breakthrough that investigators desperately needed. Although the resolution was poor, Detective Mark Delaney felt a chill run down his spine as he paused the video, enlarging the frame until the pixels blurred into abstract shapes. The silhouette in the passenger seat possessed the correct profile and the right length of auburn hair. While it wasn't definitive proof, it was undeniably the strongest lead they had encountered so far. The silver sedan's license plate was unreadable due to the camera's angle. Nevertheless, Delaney assigned 2 officers to meticulously examine every traffic camera along Riverside Drive and the nearby exit ramps. They needed to find another angle, another frame that might capture the plate number. Simultaneously, Emily's family pushed forward with a large-scale awareness campaign. Volunteers distributed flyers outside grocery stores, coffee shops, and university buildings. Local news outlets aired nightly segments, with anchors repeatedly reciting her description: 5 feet 7 inches, 135 pounds, auburn hair, green eyes. Last seen wearing a denim jacket and a floral dress. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags such as #FindEmily and #BringEmilyHome, gaining traction across the entire state. By Monday, the Asheville Police Department had activated its tip line, and calls flooded in. Most of them led nowhere: alleged sightings in grocery stores, women resembling Emily spotted in other towns, and vague claims of overheard conversations. However, a few stood out. One call came from a waitress working a late shift in the River Arts District. She claimed she saw Emily outside a corner cafe around 10:15 p.m., arguing with a man near the patio railing. The man, she said, was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she remembered Emily appearing upset. Another tip came from a homeless man who regularly slept in a makeshift camp near the riverbank. He reported hearing a woman scream around 10:40 p.m. that Friday night, followed by the distinct sound of a car door slamming. Police thoroughly canvassed the area, but the river had already risen slightly after weekend rains, potentially washing away any valuable evidence. Detective Delaney reached out to the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, SBI, for assistance. With their support, the team commenced the tedious process of tracking down every registered silver sedan in Buncombe County. The list was extensive: nearly 2,300 vehicles fit the general description, but the investigators were undeterred. Back at Emily's apartment, forensic teams meticulously combed through her room. Nothing appeared to be out of place. Her laptop remained open on her desk, tabs left on an unfinished research paper. The bed was neatly made. The laundry basket was half full, and a hiking backpack leaned against the wall, ready for her next weekend adventure. To Delaney, it was a haunting symbol of a life interrupted mid-sentence. The investigation kicked into high gear when one of the traffic cam analysts identified a possible match. At 10:46 p.m., a camera at an intersection 2 miles from the River Arts District captured a silver Honda Accord with a noticeable dent on its rear bumper. The license plate was blurred, but investigators noted that the car appeared to be a 2010 Honda Accord, almost identical to Emily's, except that hers was still parked downtown near the restaurant. A chilling theory began to emerge: whoever had taken Emily might have intentionally used a car similar to hers, possibly to confuse witnesses or to lower her guard. As police scrambled for answers, the Harpers grew increasingly anxious. Emily's mother, Linda, broke down during an interview on local television, sobbing uncontrollably into the microphone. "She's not just a face on a flyer. She's our daughter. She's a sister. She's a friend. Somebody out there knows where she is. Please, please bring her back to us." Her father, David, maintained a stoic facade in public, but privately he struggled with overwhelming anger. He started organizing search groups himself, recruiting Emily's classmates and friends. They fanned out across the wooded trails near the French Broad River, armed with flashlights and walkie-talkies, calling out her name into the darkness. The nights grew colder, and hope dwindled with each fruitless search. Detective Delaney worried that the case was on a path towards becoming a dreaded cold case. But then, on the 5th day of Emily's disappearance, the SBI lab delivered a major breakthrough. A partial fingerprint had been lifted from the hood of Emily's car, one that didn't belong to her, her friends, or her family. When the print was run through state and federal databases, it yielded a hit. The name associated with the fingerprint was Jason Miller, a 32-year-old man with prior arrests for assault and stalking. He had resided in Asheville for several years, but had recently been bouncing between odd jobs and temporary housing. His last known address was located less than a mile from where Emily's phone had last pinged. Detective Delaney now had a suspect. But as the team delved into Miller's background, they uncovered a disturbing pattern, one that suggested Emily Harper's disappearance might not have been random at all. The discovery of Jason Miller's fingerprint injected new momentum into the investigation. Detective Mark Delaney stared at the report in utter disbelief. For days, the case had felt like chasing shadows, fleeting sightings, blurred footage, and half-truths. Now, they possessed something concrete, something irrefutable, a man with a criminal record directly linked to Emily's car. Delaney immediately convened his team in the cramped conference room at headquarters. Photos of Emily adorned the walls, alongside maps of Asheville dotted with red pins marking possible sighting locations. At the center of the table lay Miller's file, thin but deeply troubling. Miller's criminal history painted a disturbing picture. In 2012, he had been arrested for following a woman home from her workplace. However, no charges were filed when the victim refused to testify. In 2015, another woman reported being harassed by him through late-night phone calls and uninvited appearances at her apartment. Again, no conviction was secured. He had a history of slipping through the cracks, leaving behind a trail of frightened women and frustrated detectives. Could be coincidence, one officer muttered, flipping through the file. Asheville's not that big. Maybe he just touched the car downtown, leaned on it while walking past. Delaney cut him off sharply. Coincidence doesn't scream at you from a riverbank. Coincidence doesn't match a vehicle spotted tailing our victim the night she vanished. His voice was firm, carrying the weight of his conviction. The team dug deeper, discovering that Miller had been terminated from a construction job 2 weeks prior. His landlord claimed that he had stopped paying rent and had disappeared from his last known address. Neighbors described him as quiet but peculiar, often seen wandering the streets at night, pacing the block, and muttering to himself. By Thursday morning, Delaney secured a warrant to search Miller's abandoned apartment. What they discovered sent chills down everyone's spines. The unit was almost entirely empty, the air stagnant with neglect. In the corner of the bedroom, investigators uncovered a stack of old notebooks filled with erratic scribbles. Many pages contained sketches of women's faces, repeated over and over with obsessive detail. One sketch bore a striking resemblance to Emily Harper, the shape of her nose, her auburn hair, even the small dimple on her chin. Even more disturbing were the maps. Folded inside a showbox, detectives found hand-drawn maps of Asheville neighborhoods, each marked with strange symbols and dates. Several highlighted areas Emily was known to frequent: her university, the cafe where she often studied, and trails along the Blue Ridge Parkway. The evidence painted a dark and disturbing picture. Miller hadn't simply stumbled upon Emily by chance, he had been watching her. News of the developments quickly leaked to the press. Reporters swarmed the police station, demanding answers. Emily's parents, David and Linda Harper, were rushed into a closed-door briefing. Linda's face turned pale as she heard the name Jason Miller. "Is he the one?" she whispered, clutching her husband's hand tightly. David's jaw clenched, anger simmering beneath his grief. However, Delaney remained cautious. "We have reason to believe he's connected," he stated. "But we don't have Emily yet. Until we do, nothing is certain." That night, officers scoured Miller's known haunts, canvassing motels, bars, and the wooded trails where he was rumored to sleep. Search dogs were deployed near the French Broad River, circling the muddy banks where the scream had been reported days earlier. But the trail seemed to vanish, swallowed by the autumn forest. Then came another break, this one more fragile, more haunting. A woman named Claire Simmons came forward, telling police that she recognized Jason Miller's photo from the news. Just a week before Emily's disappearance, Claire had been followed on her way home from work. The man had trailed her for 3 blocks, stopping only when she ducked into a crowded grocery store. She hadn't reported it at the time, dismissing it as mere paranoia, but now she was certain that the man was Jason Miller. The case was no longer simply a missing person investigation. It was evolving into something darker, the possibility of a predator lurking in plain sight. Delaney pushed his team even harder, expanding their search radius, pulling cell tower data, interviewing former co-workers, and reviewing every tip with renewed urgency. The FBI offered technical support, analyzing digital footprints. However, Miller's online presence was almost non-existent. He was a ghost. Then, late Friday night, exactly 1 week after Emily Harper vanished, a call came into the tip line. The caller, a truck driver heading south on I-26, reported seeing a silver sedan pulled off near a wooded rest stop. He remembered it because the driver appeared nervous, pacing outside the vehicle. In the back seat, he swore he saw a young woman slumped against the window, unmoving. The call sent shockwaves through the command center. For the first time, there was real hope that Emily might still be alive. Detectives mobilized instantly, racing toward the rest stop with squad cars and unmarked vehicles. The night air was thick with tension, every second stretching thin with possibility. But when they arrived, the parking lot was completely empty, no sedan, no Jason Miller, and no Emily Harper. Only a fresh set of tire tracks led into the forested back road, disappearing into the darkness. The rest stop was eerily silent when the task force arrived. Illuminated by the glow of flickering fluorescent lights and the distant hum of the interstate, officers fanned out, their flashlights cutting through the empty picnic tables and the darkened tree line. The tire tracks were the only indication that someone had been there. Detective Mark Delaney crouched near the edge of the asphalt, running his hand over the damp earth. The tracks were fresh, the mud still glistening from the evening dew. "He was here," Delaney muttered. Within the hour, a K-9 unit was brought in. The dogs picked up a faint scent trail leading into the woods away from the rest stop. Officers followed, their beams of light bobbing through the dense undergrowth. The night was cold, and every snapping twig frayed nerves. For nearly a mile, the trail wound deeper into the forest. Then, suddenly, the dogs stopped at a clearing. There, partially concealed by brush, was the shell of an old hunting cabin, its windows shattered, its roof sagging from years of neglect. The front door hung ajar. Delaney raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Weapons drawn," he whispered. The team advanced, hearts pounding. He pushed the door open, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of mildew and dust. The beam of his flashlight swept across overturned furniture, empty beer bottles, and graffiti etched into the wooden walls. But no one was there. Instead, they found evidence that someone had been living there recently, a sleeping bag rolled out in the corner and food wrappers littering the floor. Most chilling of all, a single silver earring rested on the nightstand, delicate and shaped like a small feather. Linda Harper later confirmed that it belonged to her daughter. Emily had worn that pair almost every day. The discovery ignited both hope and dread. Emily had been there, but was she still alive? Investigators secured the cabin, photographing every detail. Forensic teams collected hair strands, fingerprints, and the earring. But Jason Miller was gone, having slipped away once again. Back at headquarters, exhaustion weighed heavily on the team. For every step forward, Miller seemed to remain one step ahead. Delaney stared at the crime board, now cluttered with maps, photos, and timelines. His gut told him that Miller was spiraling, desperate and reckless, but cunning enough to evade capture. That combination made him even more dangerous. Meanwhile, Emily's parents struggled with a rollercoaster of emotions. The discovery of the earring confirmed their worst fears while simultaneously rekindling a fragile hope. Linda clutched the small piece of jewelry when the detectives returned it to her, whispering through tears, "She's alive. I know she's alive." The media frenzy intensified. Headlines screamed, "Cabin discovery in Harper case." Cable news shows debated whether Emily was still being held captive or if the case was taking a darker turn. Psychologists speculated on Miller's behavior, labeling him everything from a compulsive stalker to a potential serial predator. Public pressure on the Asheville Police Department skyrocketed. Every move was scrutinized, and every misstep risked turning the city against them. Then, just as the team regrouped, another twist landed in their laps. On Monday morning, a local hiker named Aaron Walters walked into the precinct with a disturbing find. While exploring a trail approximately 20 miles from the rest stop, he had stumbled upon a torn scrap of fabric snagged on a barbed wire fence. The fabric, he claimed, matched the photos of Emily's floral dress that had been circulating on the news. Forensics confirmed his claim. The location, deep within the Pisgah National Forest, suggested that Miller was on the move again, using the vast wilderness to conceal himself. The forest stretched for hundreds of square miles, filled with caves, abandoned buildings, and unmarked trails. Searching it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Still, Delaney refused to let the trail go cold. He coordinated with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, deploying drones equipped with thermal imaging while helicopters scanned the forest canopy. Ground teams began grid searches, though the sheer size of the area slowed progress to a crawl. Every hour that passed weighed heavily on the Harper family. David Harper, who had previously been stoic, began to lash out in frustration. In front of the cameras, he demanded that the FBI take full control of the case. "We don't need theories, we need results," he barked, his voice cracking with grief. "My daughter is out there, and she doesn't have time for bureaucracy." Behind the scenes, Delaney shared that same fear. He knew that victims of abduction rarely survived more than a week if held by violent offenders. Time was no longer on their side. And then, in the dead of night, a new clue surfaced, one that turned the entire investigation upside down. A trail camera set up by hunters near the edge of the forest captured a grainy image showing a man resembling Jason Miller dragging what appeared to be a tarp through the woods. The timestamp indicated that the image was less than 24 hours old. The grainy image from the hunter's trail camera cast a pall over the entire command center. Detectives and analysts huddled around the screen as the photo flickered under the harsh fluorescent lights. Although the resolution was poor, the figure's posture, height, and shaggy hair all matched Jason Miller's description. What chilled everyone to the bone was the shape of the object he was dragging, a heavy torp, its edges darkened with mud trailing across the forest floor. Detective Mark Delaney's chest tightened. Was it evidence, supplies, or something far worse? He couldn't voice the question aloud, not in front of Emily's parents, who had been ushered into the building just hours earlier. But every investigator in that room shared the same unspoken fear. Within hours, a full-scale search was launched in Pisgah National Forest. Dozens of officers, FBI agents, and volunteers combed the trails near where the camera had been set up. Helicopters circled above, and thermal drones scanned the canopy for heat signatures. The terrain was treacherous, steep ravines, hidden streams, and a labyrinth of unmarked footpaths that locals joked were designed to get people lost. The team split into grids, marking their progress with bright orange tape. Every broken branch and every fresh footprint was photographed and logged. At one point, a unit discovered a makeshift fire pit still warm with embers next to half-burned food wrappers. Miller had been there, and recently. Delaney walked the perimeter, his flashlight beam catching on something half-buried under leaves. He bent down, brushing away the dirt to reveal a small notebook. The cover was worn, and the pages were damp, but inside were frantic scribbles, names, dates, and fragmented thoughts. One entry stopped him cold. She doesn't see me yet. But she will. Soon she'll understand. The handwriting was erratic and uneven. Some words were scratched out and rewritten multiple times, but the implication was clear. Miller had been watching Emily long before she disappeared. The search pressed deeper into the forest, with tension rising with every passing hour. Then came the sound that froze everyone in place. A single scream, faint but unmistakable, echoing through the trees. Officers bolted toward the direction of the sound, crashing through brush and stumbling over roots. The dogs howled, straining at their leashes. Adrenaline surged through their veins. Could it be Emily? But as they reached the source, they found nothing, only a clearing where the echo had bounced off the valley walls. Whether it had been a real scream or just the forest playing tricks, no one could be certain. By nightfall, the searchers were exhausted, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat. Delaney called for a temporary halt, knowing that they couldn't risk losing people to the darkness. As they regrouped, frustration boiled over. Every lead felt like a mirage, slipping away just when they thought they were close. Back in Asheville, the Harper family clung desperately to hope. Linda replayed the scream in her head when Delaney briefed them. If she screamed, that means she's alive, she insisted, her voice trembling. David, however, was less convinced. Or it means he's playing games, he said grimly, his fists clenched. Delaney couldn't shake that same thought. Jason Miller wasn't just running. He was taunting them, dragging them into his twisted world, one agonizing step at a time. And then, just when morale began to sink, another photo surfaced. This time, it was from a different trail camera, 15 miles deeper into the forest. It showed Emily Harper. Her face was pale, and her clothes were disheveled, but her eyes were unmistakable. She was walking ahead of Miller, the hood of his jacket pulled tight over her head, his hand gripping her arm. She was alive. The photo of Emily Harper, although grainy and distorted by the night vision lens, was undeniable. Her pale face and wide, terrified eyes ignited a surge of hope and panic. Emily was alive, but she was deep in Pisgah National Forest held Emily captive. And with each passing hour spent with Jason Miller, her chances of survival dwindled further. Detective Mark Delaney slammed his fist lightly on the operations table, his frustration palpable. "We move tonight," he declared, his voice firm. "No waiting for daylight. We can't risk him moving her deeper into the mountains." Search and rescue commanders hesitated. The forest was notoriously unforgiving at night. Treacherous cliffs, hidden rivers, and dense, disorienting brush could confound even the most seasoned rangers. But the decision stood. Within an hour, tactical teams, K-9 units, and drones equipped with infrared sensors were deployed, fanning out toward the coordinates pinpointed by the second trail camera. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Emily's parents sat huddled together, their eyes glued to the live updates trickling in. Linda Harper gripped her husband's hand so tightly that his knuckles paled. "She's alive," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "That means we can still bring her home." David nodded, his jaw set in grim determination. He had obsessively studied the photo, scrutinizing Emily's slumped shoulders. The way Miller's hand clamped possessively around her arm. "Alive doesn't mean safe," he muttered under his breath, his worry gnawing at him. The tactical teams advanced with painstaking caution, their night vision goggles casting an eerie green glow on the world around them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through their veins, heightening their senses. The dogs barked excitedly as they picked up the scent, their handlers urging them forward, pushing deeper into the darkness. After 2 grueling hours, one unit stumbled upon a campsite. A smoldering fire still glowed faintly, casting long shadows, and 2 tin cans of beans sat half-empty near a fallen log. A makeshift lean-to of branches had been hastily constructed, offering minimal shelter. Inside, they found a blanket, one that matched the description of Emily's quilt from her dorm room. The one she'd brought home for the holidays, a tangible piece of her life. But Emily and Miller were gone. 5, maybe 6 hours old, muttered Officer Ramirez, kneeling to examine the fire, his experienced eyes taking in the details. They were here. But they moved on before sunset. Delaney cursed under his breath, his frustration mounting. Every step they took, Miller seemed to stay just out of reach, as if he anticipated their every move. It was a cruel game of cat and mouse played out in the wilderness. Back in Asheville, analysts continued to painstakingly piece together Miller's background, searching for clues to his next move. His profile painted the picture of a drifter, a survivalist with intimate knowledge of hunting and the local terrain. He had no family left, no fixed address, and a minimal digital footprint beyond a string of minor arrests. It was as if he'd been preparing for this moment, meticulously planning his escape into the wilderness with his captive. One analyst, a young FBI tech named Jordan Mayers, noticed something unusual in the photos. The trail cameras Miller and Emily had triggered weren't located on main hiking trails. They were deliberately hidden far off established routes. Some even on private land, suggesting a calculated effort to avoid detection. He's avoiding predictable routes, Mayers explained during a tense briefing. He's guiding her through backwoods territory that only someone who knows this forest intimately could navigate. Delaney leaned forward, his gaze intense. Meaning he's not just hiding. He's leading her somewhere. The realization sent a chill through everyone in the room. Where was he taking her, and what did he plan to do once they arrived? The following morning, as daylight finally pierced through the dense forest canopy, the search area expanded significantly. Dozens of volunteers joined law enforcement, meticulously combing ravines and old logging roads. Helicopters thundered overhead, their deafening noise scattering deer through the trees, disrupting the peace of the forest. Then, shortly after noon, a crucial breakthrough. A hiker reported hearing a girl's voice calling faintly for help near looking Glass Falls, a particularly rugged area characterized by steep cliffs and fast-moving water. The voice had been abruptly cut off, as if someone had silenced her. The search teams raced to the location, their adrenaline pumping as they scaled rocky inclines and waded through knee-deep streams. They discovered fresh tracks, one set smaller, consistent with a woman's, and the other larger and heavier. The tracks led uphill, toward the perilous cliffs. Delaney felt his pulse quicken, a sense of urgency washing over him. He's driving her higher, he realized. He knows the terrain. Will slow us down. The dogs picked up the scent again, straining at their leashes and barking wildly, their excitement indicating that they were closing in on their quarry. Officers pushed forward, their hearts pounding with anticipation and dread, certain that Emily was close. Then, as the team crested a ridge, they froze in their tracks. Ahead, on a rocky outcrop overlooking the vast expanse of the forest, stood Jason Miller. Beside him was Emily Harper. Her wrists were bound tightly with rope, her hair was tangled and matted, and her face was streaked with dirt and grime. Miller gripped her shoulder possessively, glaring at the approaching officers with wild, sunken eyes that betrayed his desperation and instability. The mountain wind whipped fiercely through the trees, creating an eerie symphony as the standoff began. The ridge was eerily silent except for the rush of the wind and the distant roar of water cascading over looking glass falls. Officers fanned out slowly, their weapons drawn but held low, careful not to escalate the already volatile situation. Any sudden move could have catastrophic consequences. Jason Miller's grip on Emily tightened as he dragged her closer to the edge of the cliff, loose gravel tumbling down into the seemingly bottomless abyss below. "Stay back!" Miller shouted, his voice raw and trembling with rage and fear. "One more step and she goes over." Emily's knees buckled beneath her, but somehow she remained upright, her body trembling with exhaustion and terror. Her wide eyes pleaded desperately with the officers, begging them for help. Her lips moved silently, but no sound escaped, her voice strangled by fear. Detective Mark Delaney stepped forward cautiously, his hands raised in a gesture of calm and reassurance. "Jason, listen to me," he said in a steady voice. "You don't want to do this. You've made it this far, but it doesn't have to end with anyone else getting hurt." Miller's face was contorted in a grotesque mask of defiance and desperation. "You don't understand," he spat out, his voice filled with bitterness. "She was supposed to see me. She was supposed to know I was the one who cared, not them, not anyone else." Delaney's mind raced, analyzing the situation. Miller wasn't just a kidnapper, he was delusional, consumed by an unhealthy obsession. He craved control and validation. If they rushed him, Emily could pay the ultimate price. "Jason," Delaney said carefully, choosing his words with precision. "You want her to see you, to understand you? Then let her live. If you hurt her, no one will hear your story. You'll just be another monster people forget." For a fleeting moment, Miller hesitated, his resolve wavering. His breathing grew ragged, his grip faltering slightly. Emily sensed the change in his demeanor, the momentary slack in his hand, and she whispered, "Please, I want to understand. Just don't hurt me." Her words hit him like a physical blow, piercing through his madness. He turned his head toward her, his expression torn between fury and longing. That single distraction, that brief flicker of humanity, was all the tactical team needed. "Now!" Delaney barked, his voice ringing out with authority. In a coordinated flash, two snipers who had stealthily maneuvered into flanking positions fired beanbag rounds. The non-lethal projectiles struck Miller squarely in the ribs, sending him staggering backward. At the same moment, Officer Ramirez lunged forward, tackling both Miller and Emily away from the precipice. They crashed to the ground in a tangled heap of limbs as officers swarmed the scene, pinning Miller's arms and wrenching the rope from Emily's wrists. She gasped for breath, sobbing uncontrollably as Delaney knelt beside her, offering a reassuring presence. "Emily, you're safe now," he said softly, his voice filled with relief, though his own heart pounded in his chest like a war drum. Miller thrashed wildly on the ground, screaming incoherently as cuffs snapped around his wrists. His cries of betrayal, "She was mine. She was supposed to be mine," echoed across the ridge, carried away by the relentless wind. The aftermath unfolded in a chaotic blur. Emily was immediately airlifted to Mission Hospital in Asheville, where doctors confirmed that she was malnourished and severely dehydrated, but miraculously still alive. Her parents rushed to her side, clinging to her as if they would never let go. Again, their reunion a powerful display of love and relief. Cameras outside the hospital captured the emotional reunion, a moment broadcast nationwide as a symbol of hope amidst despair. Jason Miller, meanwhile, was booked into Buncombe County Jail, facing a litany of charges including kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and attempted murder. Prosecutors vowed to pursue the maximum penalty, citing his meticulous stalking, his violent tendencies, and the psychological torment he inflicted on Emily and her family. In the weeks that followed, Emily embarked on the long and arduous journey of recovery. She spoke sparingly about her harrowing ordeal, the memories still too raw and painful. But in therapy sessions, she revealed fragments of her experience. The long, terrifying nights in the forest, the way Miller forced her to walk for hours on end. The paranoia he harbored about drones and police watching them from the sky. He spoke to her constantly, trying to convince her that they were destined to be together, weaving a twisted narrative of fate and obsession. She had survived not just by chance, but by carefully placating him. Pretending to listen to his deranged fantasies, pretending to understand his twisted logic, buying herself precious time until help arrived. The community of Asheville and beyond rallied around her, offering unwavering support. Vigils were held, funds were raised, and her college established a scholarship in her name, specifically for women pursuing studies in criminal justice. Her story became a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unchecked obsession and the paramount importance of vigilance. Detective Delaney, too, carried the profound weight of the case. He'd witnessed countless tragedies throughout his career, but Emily's survival felt profoundly different. It was a rare and hard-fought victory in a profession where all too often families were left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. On a grey March morning, 6 weeks after the rescue, Emily stood before a throng of reporters outside her home. She was visibly pale but remarkably steady, her parents standing protectively at her side. "I want to thank everyone who searched for me," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "There were moments when I thought I'd never see my family again. But I held on because I knew people wouldn't stop looking. I want every missing person's family to know this: don't give up. Hope is stronger than fear." Her words resonated deeply, bringing many to tears. In that moment, Emily Harper was no longer defined solely as a victim. She had emerged as a symbol of resilience, a survivor who had stared into the abyss and found the strength to climb back. As cameras flashed and neighbors applauded, Detective Delaney watched from a respectful distance, his gaze filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. He knew that her journey was far from over. Trauma left indelible scars that no rescue could completely erase. But she was alive, and in his line of work, that was often the most anyone could hope for. The ridge at Looking Glass Falls gradually returned to its familiar silence, the echoes of that final, harrowing confrontation slowly fading into the annals of history. But for Emily Harper and for all those who had fought so tirelessly to bring her home, the memory of that day would never truly vanish. On the evening of October 12, 2018, Asheville, North Carolina, was buzzing with its characteristic charm. Tourists meandered along the brick-lined streets of downtown, filling the cafes and breweries that had become synonymous with the city's identity. Street performers positioned themselves along Pack Square Park, playing bluegrass tunes under the warm, amber glow of vintage lampposts. For most, it was just another Friday night. But for Emily Harper, it marked her last known night of freedom. Emily, a 23-year-old graduate student at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, had recently settled into a small apartment near the Montfort neighborhood. Friends characterized her as responsible yet adventurous, the kind of person who effortlessly balanced her environmental science coursework with spontaneous weekend hikes along the scenic Blue Ridge Parkway. That particular Friday, Emily had dinner with two of her closest friends at a trendy downtown eatery called the Golden Finch.